Hey guys, me, Sam Stein, managing editor at the Bulwark. I'm here with my two buds, JVL, Andrew Egger. We are doing this on a Friday around 1:30 p.m. Reason we're doing this is that it just recently broke. Bit of media news, but I think much larger implications. Washington Post is not going to be endorsing a candidate for president this cycle. Now, I don't think any one of us actually thinks a Post endorsement would have moved any voters whatsoever. It is a media parlor game, a lot of navel gazing around it. But I think we all sort of agree that there's a much larger, more foreboding storyline here because of their decision not to do this. JVL, let's start with you. What do you make of it?
All right. I just want to set the table here that I hate newspaper editorial endorsements. I'm against them. We don't endorse people at the Bulwark. I don't think anybody should do it as a matter of course. And so in the abstract, I'm all in favor of this.
Right.
But this isn't abstracted. So the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, who is actually the most consequential tech billionaire in America, although he's not quite as rich as Elon Musk. And Musk is on side Team Trump, and Trump is anti-Bezos because of the Post. Trump has, talked all while he was president about trying to get the post office to go after Amazon just as retaliation for the Washington Post. And there is no way to read this decision as anything other than anticipatory surrender. And our friend Ian Basin, who heads Protect Democracy, he wrote a piece about this 2 weeks ago for the Columbia Journalism Review, in which he called it anticipatory obedience in the media.
What does that mean, basically?
Basically, what the case he laid out was that if you look carefully at what's been going on, the media has been preparing itself for an autocratic president over the last year or so. And when you see the various choices you make, you can see them beginning to try to make accommodations so that they can survive and flourish and that they'll have their faces eaten last by the leopards. And I just don't see any other way to read this decision by the Post except as an act of anticipatory obedience. And that's really concerning, because if even Jeff Bezos worries about what Trump could do to him and his business interests, right?
Yeah. Let me put a fine point on that.
That sends a message. I'm sorry, I'll shut up after the second. But that sends a message to every other businessman in America. Every corporation, every company, no matter how big or how small. It tells Jamie Dimon. This is why Jamie Dimon has said that he privately said that he supports Kamala Harris, but isn't willing to say so publicly because he's afraid of retribution.
Right. Let me put a finer point on that, because the Post, I agree with everything you said. I think the context here is also worth expanding on. The Post, sort of in the Trump era, really made its bones about being kind of a bulwark against Trumpism, about what was the tagline? Democracy dies in the darkness. They won a Pulitzer Prize in public service reporting for how they reported on January 6th. They were a punchier version of the New York Times in that they were more willing to go after Trump directly for what they saw. And so this, in that context, really is shocking. I would have not been I know that I don't think the Times does these endorsements anyway. I think they made the decision not to do that. I would not have been as shocked if the Times had done this. I think the Post, is more surprising to me in that respect. Andrew, what do you make of it?
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because it's not the only one of these that we've seen. This comes a couple days after a similar thing played out at the L.A. Times, out on the West Coast, and that played out a lot more in public. That was very explicitly the owner, coming forward. Patrick Soon-Shiong is his name, and he was tweeting about how he had not wanted them to his editorial board to make an endorsement. He had editors resign over it. He was like, I told them they could make lists of pros and cons of the two candidates. I don't know what they wanted out of me. But it's interesting because, this is all breaking right now with the Post. Like who knows what stories are going to come out. Obviously, when reporters get disgruntled, it's not hard for them to find people to take their stories.
No, I'm told their guild Slack channel is popping off right now. Yeah, there's a lot of anger in the.
Yeah, but I do think, just to kind of slipstream off of the points the point you were just making, Sam. I think if you dial back the clock to what happened in 2016, you have this, Donald Trump wins. and nobody sees it coming. Nobody expects it. It's like this punch in the jaw to basically all our institutions. And there's this sense just kind of among just sort of the liberal institutions, like, okay, maybe this is like a challenge that we can rise to, and we're really gonna it's gonna be rough, it's gonna be scary, but we're gonna meet this moment. We're gonna figure it out. And when it came to organizations like the Post, they were pretty, they did good work, and they congratulated themselves for that good work. Democracy Dies in Darkness is a real kind of pat on the back for the role we're going to play in all of this. And I think to see that institution now kind of quietly shrug its shoulders and kind of hunch over and say, well, we're still going to write all this stuff, but we're worried that if we took this one institutional step, and I'm sure that, they in an internal way, they rationalize it in all the ways we were just saying, who does it really move? What does it actually matter? What's the harm? Donald Trump would key in on this, and if we did it the other way, we'd make him mad for no reason. What would it actually accomplish? But you see that kind of slow motion accommodation, and I think it's a pretty striking example of the sort of slow collapse and atrophy of a lot of these liberal institutions over the past decade.
And let me pick up on that, because part of this, I think, is just wealth, concentration of wealth. Honestly, if Jeff Bezos was not but if he didn't have billions in government contracts, I don't think this would be a problem. This is, and Bill wrote about this. This is Bill was writing about the modern MAGA oligarchy. And this is it, right? It's people who are dependent on the government and who have hitched their wagon to Trump, right, JVL?
Yeah, it is. And it's, if you're not a socialist yet, you might be soon. I have always been vaguely commie because of the Catholic social doctrine stuff. But I had never been anti-wealth until the last 7 or 8 years, when the types of concentrations of wealth that we've seen have created things which were just fundamentally different from the Carnegies or pick the Morgans of the world, right? It used to be that you could have concentrations of wealth that were big enough to totally take over a localized area, maybe even as large as a United States. You could own parts of Pennsylvania or West Virginia.
Yeah.
You could dictate chunks of national policy and get a hearing by the White House and the federal government, especially on things like regulations to your industry. But we've moved to the point where the concentration of wealth is so large that the top oligarchs are more like non-state actors.
Yes.
And I think that turns out to have some very real challenges to the system of liberal democracy. And
right, because it puts
has made
all of
me
your
start to
dependence on
worry.
them.
Yeah.
For instance, Elon Musk. Let's just stare. 7 years ago, he's supposed to be the great savior of the environment. Tesla.
Right.
Going to transform our industries away from fossil fuels into electric. He's thoughtful and progressive. He's aligned himself with Obama. He's being hailed as a visionary. Zuckerberg, similarly, in the election, gave tens of millions of dollars to voting groups protecting the vote. Bezos altruistically bought the Washington Post, was going to be a savior of journalism. But when you put so much of your hopes and dreams and institutional desires behind singular human beings who are exceedingly wealthy, then you get fucked. You're at risk of getting fucked, basically.
What I've started thinking about, I don't know if you guys remember this, but very, very early in Putin's rule, the first gigantic fight he picked that sort of we noticed over here in the West was against Mikhail Khodorkovsky. I'm trying to remember how to pronounce his last name. And he was a Russian oligarch, a guy who, made his money, and it was too much money. And Putin was concerned that this guy's resources made him a challenge. And so he used the government to go after him, put this guy in prison. Just literally, it was one of these, it was a show trial.
Yeah.
And that's what this moment kind of feels like to me, right? Where it is a shot across the bow that no matter how rich you are, you can be Jeff freaking Bezos.
Right.
And you're going to be made to be brought to heel. Otherwise, the Trumpers are going to use their power against him. And the asymmetry of this, of course, is that nobody has to worry about upsetting Kamala Harris in case she wins.
Right.
Right. That's the, like Elon Musk, he says like, oh, they'll arrest me on day one. That's of course not true at all. Right. And so if you're Jamie Dimon, the incentives are just say it privately, because if you go public against Trump and Trump wins, you're screwed. Whereas if you go public, against Harris, and Harris wins, like, you're fine. Yeah. Like nothing totally happens.
True. Totally true. Andrew, we lost you for a second, but maybe close on this, because look, the Post, I know a lot of people at the Post. There's great journalists at the Post. They do great journalism. I don't suspect they'll stop doing great journalism. I hope they don't. But I do worry that this will kind of linger over their product for a while. That the perception of the Post now will be damaged as an institution that was willing to bend or cower or restrain itself editorially because the owner felt he had to. And I don't know how that changes the work they do. Maybe it doesn't, but I'm just sort of curious for your thoughts on that. Like, going forward, how do they handle this?
Yeah, and not to end on like the much smaller scale point, but it's a point that matters, just when you kind of look out over the media environment that exists. And it is important to have a healthy independent media. That you were saying a minute ago, this probably doesn't happen if Bezos doesn't have all of these contracts that he needs to protect with the government. But obviously it also doesn't happen if Jeff Bezos never buys the Washington Post, right? I mean, that's a business model of like how you can make this unprofitable work of journalism continue to be viable, is just find a billionaire with kind of broadly aligned values who's going to just kind of underwrite you indefinitely and hopefully won't meddle all that much in the process. That always works until it doesn't, right? That works until there becomes a reason why the values maybe don't align quite as well anymore. And I mean, JVL knows quite a bit about this too. It's kind of what happened to the Weekly Standard way back in the day. But I mean, this is it's no surprise that you see it with Bezos. You're seeing it out at the LA Times. I mean, like, as the whole kind of like corporate overlord gazillionaire class finds themselves not nearly as scandalized by Donald Trump as they did a decade ago, you're going to see this more and more frequently. You're going to see more and more people say,
"See, I disagree. They might be scandalized. They might still be scandalized, but they have made a judgment that it's not worth it, or that it's in their better interest to go along with it."
Before we get out here, Sam, can I just talk? I just want a little inside baseball that honestly only the three of us may care about. The Post editorial page has had a little bit of an identity crisis since the death of Fred Hyatt. So for people who don't know, Fred Hyatt ran the Post editorial page for many, many moons and was absolutely revered, not only there, but in the industry. Just an absolute like giant of a guy, but not in any of the big personality ways. Like just, a serious intellectual, a guy with real horsepower who ran a very, very good section, and it helped the paper and helped the institution of the paper. He dies, and the next guy there who commands that sort of respect and loyalty, not just from the newsroom, but from everybody in the business, is Marty Baron. Marty has stepped away, and he, like an hour after this news broke that the Post wasn't going to endorse, Marty came out and called it, I don't have the tweet in front of me, but I want to say cowardly, maybe?
He ripped into them. He said, on political endorsements, this is cowardice with democracy as its casualty. Real Donald Trump will see this as an invitation to further intimidate owner Jeff Bezos and others, disturbing spinelessness at an institution famed for courage.
Yeah. And Marty being out so quick out of the gate like that is going to give everybody else at the Post permission to go rogue. Yeah. And so I expect that, I mean, it's also not an accident, by the way, that this drops on a Friday afternoon. Like, that the Post understood that it was doing something terrible. Yeah. And so they're like, well, we'll try to do a Friday afternoon news dump with it. And this is going to be a very, very big story in media. But for America, it's not a media story. It's a business story. And it is a story about what a Trump-led federal government will do to businesses. And that's the big takeaway, I think.
100%. The power of the government with Donald Trump at the helm as a vendor for major corporations and individuals like Elon and Jeff Bezos, that is what you have to consider here. All right, guys, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Look, if you think the Post coward, just subscribe to the Bulwark. We won't. That's the takeaway. All right. And also subscribe to our YouTube page. Guys, take care. Have a good weekend. Talk to you later.
See ya.